If you're listening to this, you obviously like podcasts and you obviously like music too. So on Spotify, you can listen to all of that in one place for free. You don't need a premium account. Spotify has a huge catalog of podcasts on every topic, including the one you're listening to right now. On Spotify, you can follow your favorite podcasts so you never miss an episode, download episodes to listen to offline wherever you are, easily share what you're listening to with your friends via Spotify's integrations with social platforms like Instagram. So just search for Art Fight Podcast on the Spotify app or browse podcasts in the Your Library tab. And follow us so you never miss an episode of the Art Fight Podcast. Spotify is the leading music streaming service, and now it can be your go-to for podcasts too.
Welcome to the Art Fight Podcast with Brian Siskind and Joe Nolan. The fighting in art, and the art in fighting.
I was probably 14 years old, 12 years old, something like that, and I was watching the Woodstock film on my couch in my mom's basement. I think we had rented it from Blockbuster, and then and I always knew that I wanted to play drums, but I wasn't. My mom said they were too loud and your brother will break them, which is all still very true.
It's the first line of defense.
Yeah.
Let me try this, see if I can dissuade him.
Still 100% true. But anyway, but I remember seeing your solo with Santana, and it just ignited something in my brain. I don't know what it was. Maybe it's because I was 12 years old and you looked like you were 12 years old, and so it felt like maybe this was possible for me, Michael.
Yes, I think that was the reaction of a lot of people. Is that I looked like I was 12 years old, and I was up there with looked like a bunch of hooligans, and the main question is always like, how the hell did that guy get there? So
I'm sure you were existentially asking yourself that question during that moment too.
Actually, I wasn't, but which speaks to the fact that I was here now. But
hey, Michael, I'm sorry, but how old are you actually in the film when people see you in that footage playing with Santana?
20 years old in July.
Oh, man,
and the concert was in August. So,
you legitimately look like a young teenager, though. I mean, you look super young. Yeah.
Yes.
But so anyway, obviously Santana was a huge part of your life and all that, but I really am interested and I just told the beginning of the story. For me, later on, I was into a lot of music that Bill Laswell and others were producing, and I was following a lot of music by this bass player Jonas Hellborg, and some other people in that sort of kind of fusion type of scene, or whatever you want to call it. And I came across a record that Michael Shrieve had done with Jonas Hellborg and this guitarist Sean Lane from Memphis, and it completely changed my life. And I realized, that's Michael's, oh my God, right? So then I realized there was this whole body of work to start stitching together. I was aware of maybe some, various things in between Santana and them, but that was when it really connected with me. And so then I just took the initiative to call 411. Who is this guy? Where is this guy? I want to go talk to this guy, and learn, whatever I can learn. And so what we really, and Joe and I were talking about this before we got started, Michael, but it really is the choice that I made at that time in my life when I was in my early 20s to do something so outlandish from my little town in North Carolina, to just call somebody that, doesn't know me from anybody. Like it took such, I was so scared to death, but so compelled I had to do it. I didn't know why, it didn't make any sense. And I'm so glad, because I realized that instinct is actually a really good one that I carried with me throughout my life, which is to just go to if you're turned on by something, just go to the source. And I think
go to the source.
Yeah. So that was sort of, and then Michael, I guess you didn't, this is before you could even Google people to see if they were totally insane.
Yeah, I know. I always admired you for that. And it's the same thing with the way I got into Santana, where I took the initiative to drive up to the Fillmore Auditorium after calling every one of my musician friends and saying, let's see if we can sit in. And everybody I knew said, no way. And so I just said, well, I'm going to go, and just so tomorrow I can say at least I tried. And it was because of that night that I ended up, getting in Santana another year later, perhaps. But still, if I hadn't taken that initiative, it never would have happened. So I still, to this day, try to keep that in mind for myself as well, Brian. I mean, it's just a good thing to follow your instincts. So I always admired you for that. And yes, you came out, you didn't know if I was crazy or crazier than I was or what,
But that was such an interesting time because, and it's interesting now to be this many years later and have, I mean, obviously, people talk about the 60s and, flower power and all this stuff, right? And how that was a period in time, and it certainly was, but I wasn't around for that. But I do feel like, in a certain way, what we were sort of collectively around in Seattle at that time, like my introduction to that was so quick because I was, working, with you and for you, and that was a really amazing time. I mean,
in Seattle,
yeah,
it was.
Do you feel like that's sort of passing now, or is it continued, or is it just morphed?
It's morphed. I think there's still interesting things going on here. As in the same way that I think that there's probably interesting things going on in a lot of places because of the nature of the music business and the way that it's shifted. And so what happens is if people want to make music, they've got to find a way to do it. And they are not beholden, even in their minds, to like big record company deals or having to make their music so that, an air guy will like it, or, you know what I mean? It's more like they can move more freely without the burden, even in their mind, of it needing to be this or that. And I find that to be the case in my searching for new music, that there's plenty of it, and so yes, Seattle was good in that period, and it still is. And those same people are still participating. Those who a lot of people left, and I always recommend that people leave and to see the world, or at least go to New York or somewhere, and aspire to. If you aspire to more than what's available in any given town, you got to leave, and then you're free to come back if you like. But yeah, that was a particularly potent period, I believe.
I was going to ask you what, Brian mentioned how, he discovered you through the Woodstock film playing the drums, and then later on, finds you working in this, pioneering world of, electronic composing and things like that. What, and Brian, of course, is a drummer who also has done lots of work with his own electronic compositions and the scores for his films and whatnot.
Yeah.
What is I think a lot of times we think about, the people who got interested in synthesizers early, they're keyboardists and things like that, and that kind of, people who came in through that entryway. But it seems like there's a real connection between percussionists and drummers and that interest in that technology.
Well, I think I don't know if I would agree with you, but I think that there's a certain state of mind or of people who do get curious about it, and I think we're just compelled to move towards the things that we are attracted to, and I am finding that again. I am renewing my interest in electronic. Drumming and music making as much as I was, or more, or as much as I was 20, 25 years ago. And so I'm forcing myself to learn a whole bunch of new things, which I just seem to be born past that line where the DNA makes it easier for you to learn new things like software and
yeah, we're all there.
I think it's a DNA thing, and I'm determined to learn this stuff because for 20, 30 years I've been thinking if I just did that, it would free me up to create so much faster and so much more freely without inhibition, and I'm determined. So I'm at this point in my life where I'm spending at least 8 hours a day out in my small studio trying to learn these new things until it's comfortable, until I'm quick on the computer. But I'm trying to make it in a way where I'm setting it up where I can just improvise and then record everything, then go in there and cut and paste and manipulate it and collage it and do whatever it needs to be. And so I'm following that and forcing myself to not quit in frustration like I've always done in the past.
That's interesting to me because I feel like, when, the difference between, a young man or a young woman who's into art and into being creative and somebody who actually follows through and finds a way to, like you were talking about your friend, like somebody who figures out a way to make it work. So they're getting by and they're doing what they want and they're getting their work made and they're getting the bills paid at the same time somehow. And then somebody who's able to consistently do that, over decades, and still the hard part, I think, is to be able to do that and still wake up in the morning and be curious and have that hunger to learn new stuff and be, excited to be chasing it down. So like what I think for a lot of people, it's like, that's like the fire that dies. And that's why you don't see it that often. So how have you been able to do that? Do you have a sense of that, of how you've been able to stay in that, forward moving mindset?
Well, I would say that it has not been consistent, and that there's been passages of time where I'm completely disillusioned and have no idea what the hell I'm doing, and even more frightening, no idea where I'm going. And as you get older, being a drummer, it's physical. So
yeah, for sure.
And I'm getting arthritis, and it's hurting more. I'm actually taking drum lessons, like with somebody to help, like new hand technique and mechanics and stuff like that. Which I don't mind at my age, because if you're practicing, you practice differently now. At least if you've grown into some kind of wisdom, you practice more like a Zen approach. I don't mind going slow and observing, you know. So, but I've been very disillusioned and came out of it. Oh, geez, maybe 2 years ago, and just I think it had to do with we did a Santana reunion a couple of years ago, and the outcome of that for me personally was so frustrating that I just said, fuck it. It's just like, what am I doing? Do what the hell you want and just do the shit out of it, Yeah. Just like, it's all the stuff that you've always known, that it's difficult to pursue something when nobody around you is encouraging it, like your so-called musical mates or something like that. Everybody expects of you to be something other than how you see yourself. And that's a difficult point at any age, whether you're in high school, probably mostly when you're in high school, but to believe in what your intuition is telling you, that you have an attraction towards something, and you may not know what it is specifically, but it's an area that moves you, that attracts you, that you say, man, if I could just be doing that. And so it's not, I'm not really prescribing to the thing of like, do what you love and everything else will follow. I don't know. I think it's not that easy, but I think that we've got to move towards those things that ignite a spark in us.
Yeah.
So, Joe, when you ask how do you sustain that for the period of time that looks like I've done, I haven't, because I've gone through really dark periods really, I don't necessarily, just because everybody expects it of me, want to go on the road and slug it out in taverns across America and
Right.
get in a van. It's like, but if you don't do that, you're not like a music man, you know? And I'm a little bit of a snob. And that's when I say that word, I mean, if it were more sophisticated, I would say the word would be, what is that word? My taste is specific.
That's very polite. I think one thing, you know, to this thing that you're, you know, talking about, this idea of like, there's this thing you have to do, get in the van and go slug it out on the road. And then you're a music man, right? And there really is that still exists. You know, in Nashville, of course, we see it all around us all the time. And it really, to me, it seems illogical in this day and age, you know, given some of these advances, these kinds of technologies that you're learning to use, and the way that we can distribute music nowadays, all that stuff. It feels to me like there should be many, many other ways of understanding that, you know, you don't have to be a musician on the road performing live music to like be to be a music man. You know what I'm saying? It seems bizarre that stereotype is still such a part of the music scene.
Yes, but it's a vital part of it, and I get it. And I frankly, I'd like to do it too, but I'd like to do it doing what I love.
Sure. Okay, I understand.
And you know what I mean? So I get it, and I envy people that are out there all the time. I just hope they're loving it, you know?
Yeah. Well said.
Otherwise, like I could see trying to put my situation together and getting a van and going, you know?
Yeah.
But a nice van.
Right. That's also well said. Yeah, but you bring up a good point. I mean, and it's also, I mean, it speaks to the kind of things we talk about on the show very, very specifically, because, you know, it's the same thing, you know, people who are, you know, practicing martial artists, competitive martial artists, actual professional or amateur fighters. I mean, they are in the same boat where it's like they're doing this highly specialized thing, something that Brian and I see as very creative and full of beauty and wonder, right? So they're doing this sort of similar work in terms of, you know, the way that I look at it. And at the same time, when it's all said and done, even if it's just talking about a dancer, so let's say, you know, it's like, you know, suddenly the ankles start hurting and they don't stop hurting anymore. You know what I'm saying? And it's an issue. So many of our things, even, you know, I think about, you know, some of the things Brian does or other photographers do. And it's like, when I do photography projects, it's like, you know, it's a very physical kind of thing I end up doing, you know, and it's like, if you can't, like, you know, get down in some bizarre position to get this weird shot you're trying to get in this moment, it's like, then all of a sudden, you know, you have to change the way you do it, you know. So
so perhaps you should consider getting a drone from Santa Claus.
That's what Brian figured out. Brian's like, I don't have to move; I'll move the camera.
But I do think there's something to be said, though, to your point about sort of I wouldn't say it's a colossal sort of failure of imagination across the board. People are doing it, but I think that there's a responsibility to try to figure out how to transmute what you're trying to do or communicate or creatively say or feel or whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. You have to find ways that are sort of evolving and increasingly efficient, as you're talking about, Michael. You know, with your practice, I know that you know, Neil Peart went through a very similar thing that sounds like, you know, like what you're doing, where it's sort of like, how do I break a lot of bad habits, or not bad habits, but just bad habits for where I am now. You know, hand position things that contribute to your arthritis or whatever.
Sure. You mean his drum lessons with Peter Erskine and the other guy that taught everybody? Yeah.
The other guy.
You know, he's taught, you know, Steve Smith and Dave Weckl, and he's passed away now, but he was the hand technique guy in L.A. And in fact, I'm studying with one of those guys now, too. I've taken one lesson 2 weeks ago by Skype. But let me ask you, you guys read a book called The Art of Learning, An Inner Journey to Optimal Performance by Josh Waitzkin? And Josh was the youngest chess champion in the world, and then he's the guy that's featured in the film, that big film about chess from years ago. And then he left that and he started doing martial arts and became a champion martial artist as well. It's a fascinating book, and it's dealing with a lot of the same things that we are discussing.
Oh, wow.
There's a combat sports analyst that Brian and I both like, who's named Robin Black, and Robin Black has podcasts that he does that are sort of similar to this. Usually he's talking to a guest or he's just rapping to the camera himself, but he'll get into a lot of stuff about learning and optimization and all that stuff. And he's recommended that book before, and I think that guy got into like a thing where it's like in Kung Fu they call it pushing hands, where basically you're doing this sort of like hand fighting balance technique, and then whoever can throw the other guy off balance will win. So it's like a Tai Chi kind of thing, but it's like a sport, right? Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
But that sounds that book sounds fascinating to me.
Well, I think the point is that things learned from one thing. This is what your podcast is about. Knowledge acquired from one area can be applied directly to any other area.
Yes.
And especially the knowledge of learning and how to learn. And then the sidebar effect of your observation of the way you learn. And that's what's been critical for me, is to slow myself down enough to say, why is it that you give up so easily in trying to learn things that can help you in the long run when you run into difficulties? And that's why this time I'm determined to learn this stuff, because I know in the end it's going to free me up creatively. And also I have a goal of doing a solo performance show that I can just, like I said, get in my van and go and do. And I'm serious about that. I'd like to lighten up and travel the world, and just do what I do. Even last night, my wife woke me up and said, "Sweetheart, I just had this dream. We've got to get out of here. And it's turning into too late."
Oh, wow. That's heavy.
She said, like, out of the country. And she's not even like that. I'm like that. She's not like that. I'm the guy that's always looking, where in the world should we move and get the hell out of here. But it was interesting. And then she started talking about, and then in the dream, it made me think, what's important? Is it that coat or this or that, And I said, simple, I got all my stuff out in that like 12 by 12 room, and that's about it,
Yeah.
That's all I need. All these clothes, I've got a closet full of clothes. You know me, I wear the same stuff all the time. So it doesn't matter. I'm not sure what my point is, but in fact, I've lost my train of thought.
That's what we do here.
No, but I like the idea of this extra notion of being observant to how you are learning and preparing.
There we go.
And I think that is I think that's something that, at least for me, I'm not quite. I know that that's something that I have to cultivate.
Oh, I think you've been cultivating that for many years, because I think that you follow your instincts and then you figure out a way to do what you want to do, something interesting, and it's not necessarily the way you get there is not necessarily the way other people would arrive at the same place. And but you get it done, and you do what you want to do, by hook or by crook. And I think that's just what it takes. I mean, that's the artistic mind, that's the entrepreneurial mind. I mean, talk about areas of relevance. I mean, in the end, really, your life should be creative. I mean, the way you live your life is a creative statement. And now more than ever, right? Because there's more possibilities. So, but there's more possibilities because of the internet, because of anything. free yourself to, if you have an idea, to make something of it, and actually do what you'd like to do.
That's heavy. That's heavy. I just as you were with with Elvin, and people that Elvin Jones, John Coltrane, drummer, and also Force in general. But
tell me about this Elvin Jones thing, though.
So Michael, has been, and I know that Michael, your favorite thing to talk about is things that are not finished yet, that have been unfinished for long periods of time.
Don't get me started, because that's one of the big realizations I've come to in the last 2 months, is the things that I have left unfinished.
Okay.
and I am determined to get them done. And I'll tell you why, but go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, well, I guess I was just the backstory real quick is that, Michael was a longtime friend of Elvin and took a lot of time and energy back when I was around Seattle in that time. And then I think probably prior and then also after, but I was around for some of that before Elvin passed away. Mm-hmm. Michael's writing a book and has all these interviews and has all this, sort of document. And this has been a pursuit,
Fantastic.
And in a strange way, like I feel like, I wish that I could do something like that for you, Michael, because you've been important to me in the same way that Elvin was important to you, if that makes any sense.
Yes, I do understand. The situation with Elvin Jones was that I spoke to him one day about that he should write a book, and he said, "Well, why don't you do it?" And I foolishly agreed to it. And 20 years later, there's nothing out. But I am talking to Rob Wallace at Hudson Music, and we are planning something. But nowadays, I've got, from what I have already, I've gotten turned down by people. But nowadays, it could be anything. It doesn't need to be a linear book.
Yes.
It could be multimedia. It could be all kinds of things. Plus, I've got 2 nights filmed at Jazz Alley in Seattle, and not on video. Old style film. So
awesome.
And I still haven't finished it. That record that I started 20 years ago with Drums of Compassion, that finally I'm finishing it. I'm working on artwork now. But these things I feel like need to be completed so that one can move on. And the reason why I got this urge is, like I mentioned earlier, is because I got checked for cancer about a couple of months ago, and they just took a little something off above my eye, and then I missed a phone call a week later or so that said that we have the results, but we don't want to talk about it over the phone. Please call us. And it's like, oh, great. So I called and I couldn't reach anybody, and then in between that period when I couldn't reach anybody, I had an appointment with a woman that I go see every 2 weeks, kind of like a shrink, and I talk, and I record every meeting so that I can listen to myself back, because I feel real free there and I speak really honestly. And so I need to hear it back. Like, okay, where are you at? This is the way I can check myself out rather than in my head. And so because I'm vocalizing what's going on internally, and that's a real positive thing, but you wouldn't vocalize it. You just kind of have passing thoughts. So it's good for me to hear a solid voice and learn that I say the phrase, way too much. But, how people say like?
Yeah.
See what I said? How people say like, that's where I go. So at any rate, I told her an hour ago I received this phone call, and so I think I have cancer, but I'm not sure what kind of cancer. And I said, I'd like to make this discussion as if it's the real possibility, which it was, of having some, melanoma or something like that. And it was at that moment that I realized, why am I putting off certain things? And this record with Drums of Compassion, which is with Jack DeJohnette and Ayrto and, Brian, I probably started it when you were around.
Yeah,
And,
I was around for a lot of that tracking with Jeff Greinke and some others, and we did a bunch of
right.
2-inch
Right.
tape, 2-inch tape.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So what happened was, after all these years, during that session, I got to the reason why I've been putting it off. And here's what it came out to be. This record is really important to me. This music is important to me. I care about it deeply, and I love it. If I put it out, it's going to be the same thing as all the other records. It's just going to be another fucking record out there, and nobody's going to give a shit.
Mm.
And so it's more valuable to me, be important personally, than putting it out in the world and having it, diluted, or maybe my impression of it, because people don't care.
Yeah.
And so I realized that was the truth, that I was avoiding putting it out not because of fear, which, I kept thinking, what am I afraid of? What am I afraid of? It's because it means so much to me. Once I put it out, I may have to let that go.
Mm. Well, I think that's so interesting because, if you think about, so what you're saying is that this record is so precious that it's almost like if you ever release it, then you don't have it to sort of play with anymore, and this near dear thing to you to sort of continue to work on. It makes me think of this. There's a painting that's at the Met in New York that always caught me, just devastated me, and it's a painting by Rousseau, and it is a painting that, when you look at the date to see when the painting was, it has like I forget what it is, but I want to say it's a span of 35 or 40 years. And it basically goes into talking about it's just called like Black Forest or something, and it's just massive scale painting that is just, all it is it's like you're alone in a forest at night, and you can just kind of see through the trees, and it's very dark, and it's not like there's some sort of incredible amount of surrealist detail in it or something. It's quite like it's a little bit loose, but he never actually declared it finished, and basically
Right.
he died, and then they took this painting and put it in the museum and just considered it unfinished but worthy of showing. And then the fact that it he had been keeping this in the back of his studio, and it's also like a stylistic deviation from so many things that he's done. It's a very particular thing. So all of his other work, if you look at that he was doing during that time of that painting sort of being his back garage kind of project or whatever it was,
Right.
he was letting all the styles and the textures and the fads and the way that the world looks at things pass him by, while he had this really pure vision that he was sort of keeping a hold on to in the back, and then he just never let it go. And I wonder, if
Yeah.
I don't know how he passed away, but I wonder if he had a last moment to be like, what, I'm glad I never finished it.
Well, I know I've been reading. Actually, when I say reading, I'm listening on in the car to books on Audible, but also Leonardo da Vinci's biography, and it's a great one because it's by a masterful biographer, Walter Isaacson, and he had the same problem. He didn't complete things, and there were some major pieces that he never completed. And even in the book, Isaacson says, if he would have just taken a little less time on those notebooks and the detail in them, he could have finished these masterpieces. But on the other hand, those notebooks are considered masterpieces in their own right nowadays. But yeah, it's fascinating, but I had to come to terms with myself. So I have almost completed all the artwork, but some of this, I've just found out that a poem that I wanted on there, they're not granting permission, and some of the photographs, because it's called Drums of Compassion, but it just hit me, which is that it's taken this long. That what I'm going to aim it at is the migrant and immigration situation worldwide, and that there's no compassion for that anymore. For people who are struggling and leaving. The United States is getting to be one of the worst now, but that's aside from the point. The whole thing is of completion, and I'm anxious to complete these big projects that I've taken too long to complete. And now what I want to do is put a lot of stuff out, and they don't have to be big. They can be a lot of small things.
Yeah.
But I've got so much stuff backed up that I can, and already recorded and stuff like that I can clean up from the past, and I can put it all out,
Yeah.
and just be more prolific in the future. It's kind of like that question: if you could talk to your 30-year-old self now, as I am 68, something you've learned, what would it be? And what it is for me is, don't worry about it so much. Finish it and put it out and move on to the next thing.
Yeah. I love that. And it's so hard. It's so hard to do that, but because ultimately every artist has there's always going to be a huge gap between what you envision as your sort of complete work or a complete statement or a complete whatever level of expertise, or you have this greater vision, and that's why you're always striving. That's why you're actually even doing the work. But you have to be able to somehow internally give up these internal little designations of doneness of these minor sort of things that you're doing, and just call it a day and be done with it, and really just painfully stick with the decisions that you make. And I always say, like I always know if I haven't been making tons of records lately, but I'm going to be getting back into that. And like for me, I know it's done when I can't stand it anymore. Like I just, and then I get like one more brief moment of satisfaction that I can kind of reconsider my newfound hatred for it by once it's actually pressed, and I hear the master or like whatever it is, and then I have this one moment of like reconciliation with it, and then I just gotta move on. And that's really hard too, because if you're an artist that's in today's climate where you're generally marketing and driving things yourself because you don't want to answer to some asshole or some other entity that's not trying to help you, then all that's on you. And it's so hard, the labor of just getting the work done. By the time it's done to put out, like what do you even have left to do all the things that are not natively your expertise in terms of the marketing or the
publicity and booking and all the things to be a real music man.
And then what that does is that creates I think it's another cause for some of the inertia that a lot of us can experience, because that when it's done, it means a whole other sequence of stuff has to start that you don't really give a shit about. But at the same time, you want it to be done well, but you don't, it's just this whole conundrum, but like, I do feel like, Michael, you had this session that you had recorded, back, probably 15 years ago now, with a bunch of great musicians. And then you gave that stuff to me some years ago when I was living in New York, and just sent me the files. And it was definitely in and around this topic where it was like, hey man, I don't know what this is. I just want to give it up and then be freed of it. But I want to get something back that I have some input on, and then let's just get this thing done. And so we took this project and
that's a perfect example, because I had the record. I brought the guys in the studio. It was Skerrick and Rodo and
Reggie Watts.
Reggie Watts, and it was completely improvised. I came in with some loops that we played on, but I tried all kinds of things, like having guys come in and overdub stuff and try to make sense of it, and I didn't like it. But I knew that there was something there, and that's why I thought, I'll give it to Brian, because he'll be able to explode it open and have a completely different point of view than me, which I'll be grateful for. Just take it, just make it happen, and that's when you give up. You give up holding on so tightly, and it's really a beautiful thing, because then you can open yourself up to being fascinated all over again by it. And I know that you were. The way I look at you is like you're a little extreme, and I wanted somebody with that point of view to be able to, not just make it, I didn't know what you were going to do, but I trusted that it was going to be, if your aesthetic liked it, I'd probably be fine with it,
No, I appreciate that. And I know what you mean, because it was sort of like, you don't want to give it to somebody to then have just this kind of softball sort of minor reinterpretation that's not leaning. It really required somebody to sort of lean into it in almost a way that was uncomfortable for me, but you just got to do it and then kick the dirt up, and then whatever comes back, it comes back. But I was willing to, to push things because, well, I think also just the tracks that you gave me at the time, it really was a profound mystery because there was so much great playing and there were so many great ideas and there was so much things, so many amazing parts and pieces happening, but there was some weird kind of spine that it just didn't have. And I can see how any general approach at mixing, overdubbing, still keeping the real-time continuum as a requirement and in a performative way would not work for that record. And I knew that it was going to take like cutting up the time and then also introducing some other elements to just sort of disturb and shake up the forces of, the kind of energy that's at work. And it had to be something that was posthumous to the actual recording, which, it makes me argue sort of the purest aspect of it, right? Of like how real, or whatever, But in the age of, I just thought of it more as like what would William Burroughs do or something, and and I'm and
that's funny.
And so I just did what he would do, sans the heroin.
That's interesting. I mean, yeah, and for your listeners, by the way, that record is called Trilon. I had the same experience with the record that I co-produced of Bill Frisell's that was with Dave Holland and Elvin Jones. And my idea of the music to do for the record, even before we even started, was for Bill to play in an environment that Elvin was dominant, meaning, fiery and this and like Elvin kicking ass. But the way Bill decided to go, and Lee Townsend, his manager and producer, was we'll bring Elvin into Bill's world. But that meant playing like country songs and, moon over, some standards. And I thought, man, this is the wrong way to do this record. You've got Elvin in the room. And so when we were all done, everybody was baffled for 6 months. Like, are we even going to put it out? And my argument was, damn it, we should have taken a different approach. And then 6 months later, because nothing was happening, 6 months later, I said, how could we possibly go wrong with these people in a room?
Right.
Let's relook at the whole thing. Let me relook at the whole thing and just see what's beautiful about it rather than wishing it was something else.
Yeah.
And between doing some editing and sequencing and this and that, finally got to a record where it's like, oh yeah. And Bill was like, yeah, okay. Yeah, this is, but sometimes you have to, sometimes you have to just look at it from a whole point of view, which is why I'm interested in taking mushrooms again.
Yeah. This has been on my mind as well. Well, the idea of just the kids now are smarter, Michael, because they're microdosing, which is just more responsible.
No, I'm very interested in all that. And there's a brand new book out about it by a really fascinating guy making the argument for microdosing for medicinal reasons.
Yeah, I heard all about this recently. Yes.
Yeah, and I just think that every once in a while we need to have our minds exploded and get a big picture. And I know I've been desiring that. It's so interesting because once you have your mind exploded, or you, and I'm not talking about taking acid. I'm just saying when your point of view changes.
Yeah.
then you can even get down to micro stuff, and the stuff that you didn't pay attention to becomes really valuable and important. And part of the reason why I want to learn the gear and why I want to learn to edit really, really well is because there's a lot of ideas that can be brought together that are not complete unto themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really interested in just trusting my instincts and putting things together, because I've been on the same road really for 50 years. And now I want to I want to collage myself,
Yeah.
you know, even maybe going out and taking a look at my whole life's work, everything I've played on or anything, and just saying, like great artists do, they say, I can use whatever I want. Like Picasso used the African stuff, like Matisse did, or like anybody. And where everything becomes available, you know, nothing's off limits, nothing's off grounds. And then if you use your own stuff, it's like, who can argue, you know? I mean, they may not like it, but it's perfectly valid to do that, to just use whatever you want of your own repertoire, cut it up, mash it up, turn it around, do anything, and make something happen, rather than it being a linear life.
Mm-hmm. It really, that seems to be the theme, I think, throughout everything, which is there's always a way to go further, or a way out of a problem by just recontextualizing existing things, materials, perspectives,
Precisely.
all of this. And I think that's, and in a weird way, that's sort of daunting, because if you're willing to accept that as like an iterative possibility for everything, then you've got to have even more discipline or control somewhere to say, but here's some constraints around that, so that I'm doing something that feels like it's in a flower pot, or you know, it's not just like wild.
I think you're completely right. Yes, once it all opens up, then you do have to contextualize it, and you have to. What's hard once everything becomes available is keeping track of it, and there's a discipline in that. It's not like, like you go into a child's room and it's just a mess with toys. You have to, it could be like that. You know, let's say you have old cassettes sitting around, Brian, you know, I mean, just stuff.
You know, I do.
You know, so I want to listen to that stuff, and I want to pay attention to it, because I was in a different frame of mind. I was creative, but I didn't give it the weight that it needed to be given.
Michael,
in terms of value.
Yes, like this is, and honestly, there's something, when you bring up cassettes specifically, there's something so great about that sound that I just can't get past it. It's some weird harmonic thing that happens only with cassettes that I think is fantastic. By the way, Michael, I just want to go ahead and tell you, and I'm not sure that I've ever told you this, okay? And I've known you for probably a good 20 years now, but I'm just going to go ahead and level with you. There was a time in probably 1996 where I think I was basically, this is when cassettes were still pretty prominent, and you had a box of cassettes that you just were kind of trash cassettes, and you gave some to me that I was just going to record over. And I got one, and I still have it somewhere, and I'm going to find it. But I remember I got one from you, and it's actually the only thing on the tape, and I'm not even kidding, the only thing on this tape is Mick Jagger leaving you a voicemail.
Oh man, yeah, you got to get that to me.
So I'm thinking, oh my God, I keep forgetting that. Like that's, you know, in the deep tape box somewhere. But I know I'll find it, and I will digitize it, and I'll send it to you. I was sending you your tape back. How about that? I'll do both.
You know what? I've been looking for that cassette.
No, come on.
I think, hey Brian, if you go back and listen to that, I think it may be on the same cassette is Miles Davis calling.
Oh my God.
Calling for Carlos.
Oh. Okay, well I think this is the next thing.
This is Miles. Carlos there.
That's awesome.
Well, hey, so I hate to cut it, but we got to go because noise is
Okay.
noise is starting to happen in here because people are loading in for my studio opening, which is going to be happening starting
I know.
in
I'm
55
excited.
minutes.
So did you get my email about? Anyway, check your email.
Okay,
And,
all right.
and it's a pleasure to meet you, Joe and Brian. Let's catch up in the next week or so and talk about stuff.
I think that I've got to get out to Seattle.
Hey, Michael, it's great to talk.
I got to get down to Nashville to visit the museum where my Woodstock drums
That's
are.
right. That's right. It's here at the Musicians Hall of Fame.
Yeah, if you actually get in the van and start doing some gigs, be in touch with us because we can definitely hook you up with like the art music weirdo scene in town and help you get a gig and stuff.
I just read something online about the weird music scene in Nashville. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's here. Brian's right in the middle of it. Hey, really quick, Michael, I wanted to say thank you for your time, and I appreciate your insights, man, and your spirit. And I wanted to tell you really quick, I became aware of your relationship with Brian because about a year ago, the art house theater in Nashville had been closed, and when it reopened, I was anxious to go see a movie there, and Woodstock was traveling again. So I took my wife to see Woodstock, and I don't know if it was the first time she'd seen it or not, but she was like blown away by the whole Santana set, and specifically blown away by like how young is this drummer? Like this guy's out of his mind, crazy good, and he looks like a kid.
Yeah.
So like a lot of people, she ended up going down this rabbit hole, and when I told her today that we were going to be talking to you on the phone, she was like, "You got to tell that guy." Like, you know, I didn't even remember what she wanted me to say, but she's a huge fan.
Yeah.
She loves that movie, and she loves your playing, and she's a big and she has been a bit of a drummer in the past, and sort of has sort of a dream about being a drum player. She was actually a trumpet player like Miles, but so she really admired your playing and was like really starstruck when I told her I was going to be talking to you today.
Well, tell her thank you. And another thing I want to mention, and this doesn't necessarily have to be there, but the 50th anniversary of Woodstock is coming, and they're making plans. But I'm kind of taking this point of view personally that I don't want to do it. And partly because of that, because part of the charm of that was I looked like I was 12 and you're never going to replace it. And it's kind of like, leave it alone,
Yeah.
But they are in serious discussions, but I am seriously considering just saying I pass. And
I think it's one of those things.
Anyway.
I think it's one of those things where you're going to be able to equally look at it from two different sides. You're going to say, "Hey, I'm grateful that I even had this as part of my life, and so of course, why should I sort of poo-poo this thing and like go be a part of it and don't second guess it too much. Don't think about it. Don't live by it. It's done. Great." And then on the other side of it, I can see how it's certainly like a perceivably sort of limiting thing. I know that you've wrestled with that. It's, I'm not saying like that you're sort of afflicted in the same way that a child star was afflicted or something, but I'm not saying
something like that.
I'm not saying you're the Ricky Schroeder of jazz. I'm sorry,
Well,
it's
actually,
Rick
it
Schroeder.
is something like that because it's like a handful of people that know my other work outside of Santana.
Yeah.
So, and if it's Santana, it's Woodstock. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, if I go out on a clinic tour and I ask people how many people have heard anything I've done, like it's like that guy in The Life of Brian, like, I do,
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that Brian and me and my wife all appreciate like the whole body of work, and again, really, I also really appreciate the insights that you're laying on us today. I mean, the things you're talking about are exactly the kind of things we want to talk about in this podcast.
Yeah, so we're gonna have you back, by the way, as you have no choice.
And you're a perfect first guest for our new
that's a
second
good idea.
season.
We're not done. Okay, guys,
We're not done.
Have a great night.
Talk to you soon, brother.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take care. All right, so that concludes season 2.
Season
Episode
2's
one.
over. Yeah.
Episode 1.
That was awesome. That was really fun.
Yeah, that was really good. So let's just wrap it, get out of here. We got a party to have. All right. Preach. Thanks, Joe.
Okay guys, I love the Art Fight podcast, and I listen to every episode even though I am a robot trying to sound like an actual person. I know it takes a lot to keep the podcast going. How can I help?
Go to anchor.fm/Art Fight Podcast. Click on the button, the big old button that says support this podcast. And once you get there, you'll have 3 options. You can just choose the lowest level. You're going to pledge 99 cents a month to our production and help us out. Again, anchor.fm/Art Fight Podcast. Click on support this podcast. All right. Thanks, everyone.